Racist cop attacks black woman, freezes when she outsmarts him in 7 minutes. In this eye-opening video, we delve into a shocking incident that highlights the ongoing issues of racial profiling and police misconduct. The video captures a tense encounter between a black woman and a police officer, shedding light on the challenges faced by marginalized communities. Through a compelling narrative, we explore how quick thinking and intelligence can turn the tables even in the most intimidating situations. If you are enthusiastic about this narrative, please inform us. If you appreciated the video, press 1. If not, select 0. Your feedback genuinely motivates me to collect additional uplifting and significant narratives.
Rachel Carter is a fire safety expert with over a decade of experience in assessing and improving safety systems in urban areas. Known for her determination, meticulousness, and ability to handle emergencies, she has built a strong reputation in the field. Rachel's work often requires intense focus and, at times, solitary efforts in seldom frequented environments. This has accustomed her to facing unexpected situations. That evening, Rachel had just finished inspecting the outdated fire suppression system of a large shopping mall in the suburbs. After a long day of work, she was packing up her tools in the vast but deserted parking lot. The dim yellow glow from the light poles cast a quiet yet isolating atmosphere. Dressed in a reflective vest and professional uniform, she blended into the scene like an ordinary worker. Ethan Bradley, a middle-aged police officer, sat in his patrol car parked in a far corner of the lot. His career, plagued by a series of mistakes and rash decisions, had reached a downward spiral, leaving him isolated from colleagues and society. Once harboring hopes of advancement, Ethan now faced frustration and anger, leading him to seek opportunities to assert his authority, even in trivial matters. Ethan had once been a promising officer, earning praise from superiors during the early years of his career. However, a string of errors in critical missions, including a misjudgment during a pursuit that allowed a suspect to escape, had significantly tarnished his reputation. Colleagues who once respected him now kept their distance, viewing him as a failure. Sitting in his patrol car, Ethan's eyes scanned the empty parking lot. He noticed a truck parked there longer than usual. Under the dim lights, he observed Rachel loading large equipment into her vehicle, fire extinguishers and tools that appeared industrial. A thought crossed Ethan's mind. These items, if tampered with, could be used for dangerous purposes. Could this be a cover for something illegal? Not just his work, but Ethan's personal life was also fractured. His wife, whom he deeply loved, had decided to leave him, taking their young son after enduring years of his temper and increasing bitterness. "If you don't change, Ethan, you'll lose everything," she had said before walking out. Those words, along with the loneliness they left behind, haunted him every day. Patrolling, the only thing that made Ethan feel valued, had now become a stage for him to assert authority. Any action by others that he deemed challenging often ignited the simmering anger within him. From his car, Ethan focused on Rachel as she carefully loaded fire extinguishers and tools into her truck. His suspicion grew. A woman working alone at this hour seemed unusual. Despite her professional attire, he interpreted it as an attempt to pose as an employee to conceal some illicit activity. Ethan saw this as an opportunity to escape the monotony of his shift and assert his authority. Without reporting to dispatch or requesting backup, he decided to approach Rachel, eager to uncover something illegal and prove his capability. He turned off his patrol car engine and stepped out with a confident yet imposing stride. His hand hovered over his utility belt, ready for any scenario, while his eyes stayed locked on Rachel's every move. Rachel, initially unaware of Ethan, sensed someone's presence as the heavy footsteps drew near. Turning around, she saw a police officer with a stern expression standing just a few feet away. "Good evening. What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his tone sharp, his gaze fixed on the fire extinguishers and tools in Rachel's truck. Although surprised by his sudden appearance, Rachel maintained a calm demeanor and replied, "I just finished inspecting the fire suppression system in this mall. I'm cleaning up to leave now." Despite her clear and reasonable answer, Ethan's suspicious gaze remained. To him, the matter wasn't so simple. "Prove it," Ethan demanded, his voice commanding. "Do you have any paperwork to show you're authorized to work here at this hour?" Rachel sighed, feeling frustration rise. This wasn't the first time she had been misunderstood because of her job, but looking into Ethan's eyes, she realized he wasn't genuinely seeking the truth. He was merely looking for an opportunity to assert his authority. The confrontation had only just begun, and Rachel quickly understood that her quiet evening wasn't going to end peacefully. Rachel felt Ethan's scrutinizing gaze fixed on her, not just curious but laden with clear suspicion. The dim light of the parking lot did little to ease the tension steadily building between them. Ethan took a few steps closer to Rachel, his voice cold but authoritative. "What are you doing here at this hour? And why do you have all this equipment?" Rachel, maintaining her professional demeanor, turned to face Ethan. She understood this wasn't the first time she'd dealt with an overzealous law enforcement officer, but the aggressiveness underlying Ethan's tone made her feel more irritated than usual. "I just finished inspecting the fire suppression system in this shopping mall," Rachel said, trying to keep her voice calm. "The job took longer than expected, so I'm packing up to leave." Ethan remained unfazed. His eyes scanned the neatly organized equipment in Rachel's truck. Large fire extinguishers, specialized tool kits, and several carefully wrapped technical documents, all of which seemed to deepen his suspicion. "Do you have any paperwork to prove that?" he asked, his tone growing sharper. Rachel sighed lightly, opened her bag and took out her employee ID and a certificate from her company, handing them to Ethan. "This is my employee ID. I work for Metro Fire Safety Consultants. If you need, I can call the mall's management to verify." Ethan took Rachel's ID but barely glanced at it before handing it back, as though the action was just a formality. In his mind, unfounded doubts began to form. Who works alone at this hour? Why would she need industrial equipment like this? He stepped back slightly, his hand resting on his utility belt, a subconscious gesture of authority. "This paperwork doesn't prove anything. Anyone could forge something like this. Even your uniform doesn't prove you're legitimately working here." Rachel tried to stay composed, but the absurdity of Ethan's remarks was beginning to frustrate her. "Look, I don't understand why you're questioning me, but I'm just doing my job. If you don't believe me, you can call the mall's management. They'll confirm that I have every right to be here." Ethan had no intention of calling anyone. He felt his authority being challenged by Rachel's calm and professional response. Instead of backing off, he became even more determined to assert his control over the situation. Trying to appear composed, Ethan took a step forward and asked in a softer tone, "Can you elaborate? These tools look very professional, but I need to be sure they're not being used for anything outside of work purposes." Ethan knew he needed a valid reason to dig deeper, rather than appearing too overbearing. In his mind, he justified his persistence. "If I don't investigate thoroughly and something happens, I'll be held accountable." Rachel couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I've already explained everything clearly. I'm not hiding anything. Everything I have here is listed in my reports, and I'm happy to provide documentation if you require it." Despite her efforts to remain professional, Rachel could sense that Ethan wasn't interested in finding the truth. He was simply looking for an opportunity to wield his authority. His eyes no longer held curiosity, but were now filled with a desire to dominate and control. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Rachel responded, "I've done everything I can to cooperate with you. If you still don't believe me, I don't know what else I can do." Ethan squinted, his eyebrows narrowing in a clear expression of challenge. In his mind, this was no longer a simple inspection. It was an opportunity to assert his authority, something he had long lost in both his career and personal life. The tension escalated, with Ethan increasingly driven by his sense of failure and fragile power, while Rachel stood firm against the unreasonable imposition of a public official. The air in the parking lot grew heavier with each of Rachel's clear but dismissed answers. Ethan stood there, his hand lightly grazing his utility belt as his eyes continued to scan the truck and the meticulously organized equipment Rachel had loaded. In his mind, a storm of suspicion grew, fueled by a sense that he couldn't let this situation pass without action. "These tools don't look like they're just for fire safety," Ethan said, his tone now accusatory. "Who knows what else they could be used for? Do you know these fire extinguishers could be modified into weapons?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, unable to believe what she had just heard. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and restrained indignation. "Very serious," Ethan replied, stepping closer to her truck. "I have the authority to inspect all of this. If you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind me taking a look, right?" Rachel held her ground, her gaze now colder. She no longer tried to de-escalate the situation, shifting instead to defend her rights. "No, you don't have the authority to inspect my equipment," Rachel said firmly but calmly. "These tools aren't for just anyone to handle. They're regulated, used for specialized purposes, and you don't have the expertise or the jurisdiction to inspect them." Ethan felt as though she had challenged him outright. The sensation of losing control, something he desperately tried to maintain, ignited his anger. His eyes flashed with irritation as he stepped even closer, closing the gap between them to just a few feet. "You're obstructing an officer in the performance of his duty. You know that, don't you?" Ethan said, his tone laced with threat. Rachel's refusal felt like a slap to Ethan's already fragile pride. He didn't just feel dismissed by her, he felt humiliated. Memories of his failures, colleagues avoiding him, superiors chastising him for his poor judgment, seemed to surge back in that moment. "I don't need someone telling me whether I know or not," Ethan said, his voice tight with anger. "I have the right to inspect if I see something suspicious, and you look very suspicious." Rachel could feel her frustration rising, but she fought to keep her composure. She knew arguing further would only escalate the situation. "You can call the mall's management or even your superior to verify, but I won't let you touch my equipment. They're delicate and can easily be damaged if mishandled." Rather than considering her words, Ethan interpreted them as a direct challenge. He couldn't tolerate being refused, especially when he was trying to assert his authority. "Who do you think you are to tell me what I can and can't do?" Ethan shot back, his voice, now stripped of any calmness, replaced by barely contained rage. "I don't need anyone dictating how I do my job. I'll inspect it if I see fit." Rachel realized that Ethan was no longer acting as a police officer performing his duty. He was letting his emotions take over. "You're letting your emotions control you," Rachel replied, her voice still steady but firmer. "I haven't done anything wrong, and I won't allow you to abuse your authority. If you want to proceed, call your superior here now." Ethan took another step forward, his hand brushing over his utility belt in what felt like an implicit threat. Rachel could feel the tension between them thickening, the situation growing more dangerous. "You should watch your tone," Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. "I'm not obligated to take orders from someone like you." Rachel stared back at Ethan, her gaze unyielding. Though she understood she was dealing with someone willing to go to any lengths to assert his power, she refused to back down. The space between them was now charged with suffocating tension, and Rachel knew the situation would only escalate further unless Ethan chose to back off. The tension between Rachel and Ethan was so thick it seemed to compress the entire parking lot into an oppressive weight. Rachel stood firm, her gaze sharp but her demeanor calm. Ethan, however, could no longer maintain the composure his job demanded. When Rachel refused his request for an inspection, Ethan felt an unbearable sense of humiliation. This defiance didn't just come from a woman he viewed as beneath him in authority. It also dredged up bitter memories of past failures. Months ago, during a meeting, Ethan's superior had openly criticized him for his poor handling of a case. "If you don't improve, I don't see a future for you here," his commander had declared, silencing the entire room. Ethan, though he didn't argue back, felt his pride shatter under the pitying glances of his colleagues. Now, as Rachel's skeptical gaze met his, Ethan didn't just see the woman in front of him. He saw every person who had ever looked down on him, his superiors, his co-workers, even his wife, who had left him. "No one has the right to belittle me anymore," Ethan thought, his wounded pride morphing into a simmering rage. The feeling of failure consumed him again, and he decided that tonight he would regain control, no matter the cost. These bitter thoughts grew sharper as Ethan reflected on his family. His wife, once the love of his life, had left him, unable to endure his domineering personality and constant irritability. The brief phone calls with his son, whom he rarely saw, only reminded Ethan that he had nothing left to hold on to outside of work. And now, in front of him, a stranger was refusing the demands of a police officer. To Ethan, it wasn't just disrespect. It was a glaring reminder of the failures he tried to bury. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to contain the anger boiling inside him. "I can't let her win. Not this time." He stepped closer, his voice now sharp and commanding. "Don't you understand the situation? This isn't a request. This is an order. I'm performing my duty, and you are required to comply. If you don't, there will be consequences." Rachel didn't flinch. She looked Ethan straight in the eye, her tone steady but resolute. "I've already explained. I haven't done anything wrong, and I won't let you abuse your authority to create a problem where there isn't one. If you have an issue, call your superior." Rachel's calmness was like fuel to Ethan's fragile ego. He felt more challenged than ever. "You're trying to make this difficult for me, aren't you?" Ethan growled, stepping even closer until only a few feet separated them. "Who do you think you are? Some kind of expert? Someone who has the right to refuse me?" Rachel held her ground, but she could see that Ethan was no longer thinking rationally. His anger and feelings of inadequacy had completely taken over. Ethan abruptly pointed at Rachel's truck, his voice rising. "Fine. If you won't let me inspect, I'll do it myself. And if I find anything suspicious, you'll be arrested right here and now." Rachel frowned. "You don't have the authority to do that without a valid reason or a search warrant." Her words only deepened Ethan's sense of losing control. He didn't care about the rules anymore. To him, this wasn't about protocol. It was a battle he had to win. "You don't get to tell me what I can or can't do," Ethan shouted, his voice echoing through the empty parking lot. "You'll regret it if you don't comply with me." Even though Rachel recognized she was dealing with someone on the verge of losing complete control, she refused to back down. She took a step back, maintaining a safe distance, her voice firm and clear. You're crossing the line and you know it. I've provided all the necessary information and documentation. If you continue to act this way, I'll have to report your behavior to your superiors." Rachel's words hit Ethan like a cold slap, but not in a way that made him reflect on his actions. Instead, he felt threatened. To him, the prospect of being reported was an unforgivable humiliation. The thought of Rachel damaging his already fragile reputation made him feel desperate to shut her down before she could act. Ethan's grip tightened on his utility belt, his hand hovering over his baton. For a moment, he hesitated, torn between continuing the verbal confrontation or escalating the tension with physical action. Ethan stood frozen for a few seconds, his gaze locked on Rachel. Her refusal felt like an unforgivable challenge. The humiliation and loss of control stoked the fire of his anger. With a resolute movement, he stepped toward Rachel's truck, his eyes flashing with a dangerous determination. "Fine. If you won't let me inspect, I'll do it myself," Ethan shouted, his voice dripping with menace. Without waiting for Rachel's response, he reached for one of the large fire extinguishers lying near the rear of her truck. Rachel immediately stepped forward, trying to stop him. "You can't do that," she yelled, her voice firm yet wary. "These aren't toys. If you don't know how to handle them, you could hurt someone." Ethan ignored her. His hand gripped the handle of the fire extinguisher tightly, yanking it roughly from its mount. But as he pulled, his finger accidentally hit the activation lever. A powerful stream of white powder sprayed out, creating a dense cloud around them. Rachel coughed and stumbled back, trying to avoid inhaling the powder. She waved her hand in front of her face, struggling to see through the thick mist. "I told you," she yelled through her coughing fit. "You don't know what you're doing." Covered in white powder and unable to see clearly, Ethan became even more disoriented and enraged. He staggered a few steps, fumbling with the extinguisher as he tried unsuccessfully to stop the spray. Rachel, sensing the growing danger, stepped forward, reaching for the extinguisher to neutralize it. "Give it to me," Rachel said, her voice firm but not threatening. "You don't know how to turn it off. Let me handle it." But Ethan wouldn't yield. In his mind, this was no longer about an inspection or doing his job. It had become a battle for dominance, a battle he couldn't afford to lose. In a fit of rage, he yanked the extinguisher away from Rachel's grasp, forcing her to step back. In his uncontrollable anger, Ethan dropped the extinguisher to the ground. His hand immediately went to his utility belt, pulling out his metal baton with a sharp, metallic click. "Don't test me!" Ethan roared, pointing the baton at Rachel, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can tell me what to do? I'll show you who's in charge here." Rachel raised her hands in a gesture of peace, though her eyes stayed focused on the baton in Ethan's hand. "Listen, you need to calm down," she said, her voice steady but loud enough to cut through the tension. "I don't want this to escalate any further. Put the baton down and we can talk." Ethan didn't respond. He took a step closer to Rachel, his movement signaling his intent to intimidate her. Rachel could feel the danger growing, and her instincts for self-preservation kicked in. When Ethan swung the baton at her, Rachel reacted quickly, stepping to the side to avoid the strike. "You don't need to do this," she shouted, her voice a mix of caution and warning. But Ethan had lost all reason. He swung again, harder this time, but Rachel blocked the blow with her arm, pivoting to reduce the impact. "You don't have to prove anything," Rachel said quickly, her voice urgent as she tried to pull Ethan back to reality. "This isn't about me or you. You're putting yourself in danger. Please, stop this." Ethan didn't listen. His mind was clouded by rage, and all he could feel was the overwhelming need to assert his authority. He swung the baton again, but this time Rachel caught it, She quickly twisted her body, using her momentum to push Ethan back and create space between them. "Don't do this," she warned, her voice now sharper and more commanding. "You're going to hurt someone, and it could be yourself." Ethan staggered backward, but instead of calming down, his expression grew even more unhinged. The fury in his eyes had taken complete control, and Rachel realized her words no longer had any effect. The situation had spiraled completely out of control. Rachel stood facing Ethan, her eyes locked on the baton in his hand. The oppressive tension in the parking lot pressed heavily on her shoulders. Although she maintained an outward calm, she knew the situation was spiraling further out of control. As Ethan stepped closer, a mall security guard entered the scene, noticing the danger. Seeing Ethan with the baton in his hand and Rachel keeping her distance, the guard quickly reached for his radio. Not only did he begin recording the scene with his phone, but he also called the mall's security center directly. "We need immediate backup at the north parking lot," he said urgently into his radio. "A police officer is exceeding his authority and threatening a woman." The security guard hesitated, keeping a safe distance, unsure if he had the authority to intervene. Instead, he continued recording the incident on his phone. After calling for backup, he took a few cautious steps forward, raising his hand in a gesture of de-escalation. "Hey, both of you, calm down. There are cameras here and everything is being recorded. Let's resolve this reasonably," he called out, his voice firm but attempting to mediate. Rachel glanced over and noticed the guard's presence. A flicker of hope sparked within her, though she knew the guard alone might not be enough to defuse the situation. Still, his presence could provide crucial evidence if things escalated further. Ethan also noticed the guard recording from a distance, and this only fueled his anger. To him, this was no longer just a personal confrontation. It had become a public performance, one where his authority was being questioned. "What are you doing there?" Ethan barked, his voice filled with menace. "Get out of here. This is police business." But the guard didn't leave. He only took a step back to maintain his distance while continuing to record. The defiance of this witness pushed Ethan further into a state of uncontrollable rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Ethan snarled, turning back to Rachel, his face red with anger. "I gave you a chance to cooperate, but all you've done is resist." Before Rachel could respond, Ethan reached for the pepper spray on his utility belt and sprayed it directly at her. The burst of pepper spray engulfed Rachel, forcing her to stumble back. She raised her hands to shield her eyes and coughed violently as the chemical burned her face and invaded her lungs. The stinging, disorienting sensation overwhelmed her, leaving her momentarily stunned. But Rachel refused to let herself be defeated. Her training in emergencies kicked in, and her survival instincts took over. Turning away from Ethan, she moved quickly, attempting to find a clearer space to escape the chemical cloud. Despite her blurred vision and labored breathing, Rachel used the parked cars as obstacles, weaving between them to put distance between herself and Ethan. Her voice, raspy from the pepper spray, rose in protest. "What are you doing?" Rachel shouted. "You're losing control. Stop this before you hurt someone, including yourself." Ethan didn't listen. He stormed through the rows of parked cars, baton still in hand, his face contorted in rage. To him, this was no longer about enforcing the law, but salvaging his wounded pride. Rachel continued to increase the distance between them, buying herself time to steady her nerves and reassess the situation. Although her vision remained blurry and her breathing strained, she began regaining enough clarity to evaluate her surroundings. The security guard, still at a distance, continued recording the unfolding events on his phone. His presence now served as a critical factor, a silent witness documenting Ethan's escalating actions. Ethan, realizing he was being filmed, felt a wave of humiliation and fury wash over him. His mind spun with fear. If this video gets out, my career is over. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he struggled to think. I have to act now. I can't let this happen. With a renewed, desperate determination, Ethan turned to face the security guard. In his eyes, this wasn't just about maintaining control of the situation. It was about protecting his crumbling career. Rachel, observing Ethan's frenzied state, knew she had to end this before anyone got hurt. But seeing the anger in Ethan's eyes, she realized that reason had completely abandoned him. The confrontation had reached a critical point, and Rachel understood that she needed to act, to protect herself and the security guard, and ensure the truth would come to light. The dim lighting of the parking lot mingled with the lingering cloud of pepper spray, creating a suffocating and tense atmosphere. Rachel, though her vision was blurred and her face still burned from the spray, knew she had to remain calm to deal with Ethan, who had completely lost control. Ethan, gripped by rage, tightly held the taser he had drawn from his belt. His eyes burned with fury and an unyielding determination. Raising the taser, he stepped toward Rachel, his voice a menacing growl. You've made things worse for yourself. I gave you a chance, but you wouldn't listen. Now, get down and put your hands on your head, or I'll be forced to do this. Rachel, crouching behind a row of parked cars, listened intently to Ethan's voice, trying to pinpoint his location. She knew compliance wasn't an option, not when she was facing someone so completely ruled by his emotions. Her hand brushed against the fire extinguisher Ethan had dropped earlier. Feeling its solid frame under her fingers, she realized it was her only tool for self-defense in this escalating situation. She gripped it tightly, her mind racing for a plan. Ethan stalked through the rows of cars, his taser raised, ready to fire. As he rounded a corner, Rachel suddenly lunged from the shadows. Using the fire extinguisher as a shield, she blocked the taser's prongs, which crackled harmlessly against the metal surface. Seizing the moment, Rachel thrust the heavy extinguisher toward Ethan, striking his shoulder with one of its edges. The blow sent him stumbling backward, his face contorted in pain and surprise. He staggered for a moment before collapsing to the ground, the taser slipping from his grasp and rolling a few feet away. Rachel stepped back, still holding the fire extinguisher, her breath ragged but her eyes fixed on Ethan. He lay on the pavement for a moment, gasping for air, but his expression quickly shifted from pain to fury. With a guttural roar, Ethan pushed himself up onto his hands, struggling to get to his feet. "You think you can take me down?" he shouted, his hands trembling as they reached for the taser. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Rachel kept her distance, carefully maintaining a safe gap between them. "Stop, Ethan!" she shouted, her voice both a warning and a plea. "You're only hurting yourself. You need to stop now before this gets even worse." But Ethan, blinded by pride and uncontrollable rage, ignored her words. He grabbed the taser, his eyes blazing with defiance and the drive for retaliation. Rachel took a deep breath, tightening her grip on the fire extinguisher. It was her only shield and weapon now. "Ethan, don't do this. You're already injured. If you keep going, you'll only make things worse for both of us. I don't want to hurt you, but I will defend myself if I have to." Ethan glared at Rachel, his body trembling not only from pain, but also from humiliation. Her words seemed to cut into his already bruised pride, reigniting the flames of his anger. "You'll pay for this," Ethan growled, his voice low and full of menace. With clumsy but rapid movements, he raised the taser, ready to strike again. Rachel saw Ethan preparing to fire the taser. Before he could act, she abruptly lifted the fire extinguisher and sprayed a powerful burst of powder directly at his face. The cloud engulfed Ethan, who recoiled in shock, raising his hands to shield his eyes and struggling to breathe through the dense mist. Rachel didn't hesitate. She charged forward, using the edge of the fire extinguisher to knock the taser out of Ethan's hand. The device clattered to the ground and skidded several meters away, out of his reach. The situation had reached its boiling point. Rachel stood over Ethan, faced with a critical decision: wait for external help to arrive or confront the immediate danger on her own once more. The sound of the security guard's voice shattered the oppressive tension hanging over the parking lot. "That's enough. Stop right now," the guard called out firmly from across the row of cars. A man in his early 30s strode quickly toward them, his phone still raised, recording everything. Ethan froze momentarily, his furious gaze snapping toward the security guard. He hadn't expected a witness to intervene so directly, and this hesitation gave Rachel the opportunity she needed. In an instant, she darted toward her truck, where her phone lay on the passenger seat. Though her vision was still blurry from the pepper spray and her face burned, her instincts and determination guided her through the dim parking lot. "You have no right to do this," the security guard shouted, keeping his distance but continuing to record the scene. "I have everything on video, and other officers will be here soon." Ethan, now fully aware that he was being recorded, felt his rage and humiliation intensify. He turned toward the guard, his eyes blazing red. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Stop that now," he bellowed. The guard, though his voice wavered slightly, refused to back down. "I'm doing my job. You're way out of line, and I'm not letting this go any further." Ethan took a few aggressive steps toward the guard, jabbing a finger in his direction. His voice was laced with menace. "You have no idea who you're messing with. Put that phone down right now, or I'll arrest you for interfering with an officer." But the guard held his ground, refusing to stop recording. Instead, he shouted back, "If you don't stop, I'm calling the police right now." While Ethan was distracted, Rachel reached her truck and grabbed her phone. With trembling hands, she dialed emergency services, her voice steady and resolute as she reported the situation. "This is Rachel Carter. I'm at the north parking lot of Westview Mall. A police officer is exceeding his authority and using force against me. I need immediate assistance." Hearing Rachel's voice, Ethan spun around, his expression darkening further when he saw her with the phone. What enraged him even more was the guard still filming everything from a short distance away. The realization that his actions were being recorded and could be used against him pushed Ethan to the brink of control. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Ethan growled, storming toward Rachel with the taser still clenched tightly in his hand. "You're going to regret trying to outsmart me." Rachel backed away, clutching her phone, her eyes locked on Ethan. "Don't do this, Ethan. You've gone too far already. Everything you're doing will come to light," she warned, her voice firm but calm. Ethan glanced briefly at the security guard who continued to film, and the fury inside him boiled over. All he could think about was regaining control of the situation, no matter the cost. Rachel, with her phone still in hand, knew she needed to buy time until help arrived. But the crazed look in Ethan's eyes and his quickened steps toward her told her this confrontation was far from over. She braced herself for whatever might come next. The wail of police sirens pierced the tense atmosphere of the parking lot, their flashing blue and red lights illuminating the chaotic scene. Rachel, still standing near her truck with the fire extinguisher in hand, exhaled a sigh of relief as the patrol cars approached. Ethan, staggering on the ground, looked up with a mix of anger and fear. He realized the situation had spiraled out of his control, but his stubbornness wouldn't allow him to admit his mistakes. 2 officers exited the patrol cars swiftly, one approaching Rachel, the other heading toward Ethan, who was still clutching the taser. They scanned the scene, the security guard recording from a distance, Ethan gripping the taser, and Rachel holding the fire extinguisher, her face marked by traces of pepper spray. The first officer, a woman with a stern expression, raised her hand in a calming gesture. "Everyone, calm down. We need to figure out what happened here." Rachel immediately spoke up, her voice steady despite her labored breathing. "I'm Rachel Carter. I work for Metro Fire Safety Consultants and was completing a fire safety inspection. This officer," she pointed at Ethan, "attacked me without cause. He used excessive force and threatened me repeatedly." The officer glanced at Ethan, who was struggling to get up, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "That's not true," Ethan yelled, desperately trying to redirect attention. "She's dangerous," he shouted, his voice laced with frustration. "She had industrial equipment in her truck, refused to cooperate, and even attacked me. I was just doing my job." Hearing his accusations, Rachel felt a wave of anger rise but quickly suppressed it. She knew her actions now would heavily influence how the officers assessed the situation. "That's not true," Rachel said firmly but calmly. "I have evidence. He sprayed me with pepper spray and threatened me with his baton. He didn't follow any protocol and completely lost control." The security guard, who had been recording the entire incident, stepped closer while maintaining a safe distance. "I have everything on video," he called out. "This will prove she's telling the truth." Ethan, realizing he was being filmed, suddenly lunged toward the security guard, his intention clear. He wanted to grab the phone, but the guard quickly moved, weaving between parked cars to keep his distance, shouting as he went, "You're not getting this. It's already backed up to the cloud. Just stop. You can't escape this." Seizing the distraction, Rachel dashed forward and retrieved the taser from the ground. She held it firmly in her hand, ready to defend herself if Ethan tried to approach her again. The quick reactions of both Rachel and the guard temporarily diffused the immediate threat, but the atmosphere remained thick with tension like a storm waiting to erupt. The second officer, an older man with sharp eyes, addressed the guard. "Did you get everything on video?" he asked in a serious tone. "Yes," the guard replied, holding up his phone. "I started recording when he pepper sprayed her." The female officer took the phone and began reviewing the footage. As she watched, her expression shifted from focused to cold and unyielding as she turned her gaze to Ethan. "This video clearly shows you using unnecessary force," she said, her voice firm. Ethan tried to defend himself, his voice trembling with desperation. "She was resisting. She refused to obey me. I was just doing what I had to." Recognizing the critical nature of this moment, Rachel stepped forward and added, "I also have a dash camera in my truck. It recorded the entire confrontation from the beginning until now. I'm more than willing to provide the footage." The male officer nodded, his gaze now fixed on Ethan with growing suspicion. "It seems this situation is more complicated than your version of events, Officer Ethan," he said, his tone heavy with authority. Ethan, now cornered, had nothing left to say. Both the witness's video and Rachel's account directly contradicted the narrative he was trying to construct. The realization that his actions were indefensible filled him with anger, but he knew that rage wouldn't save him now. The 2 officers exchanged a glance, their silent understanding evident. "We need to gather more information," the female officer said, her voice resolute. But, based on what we've seen and the video evidence, it's clear your actions exceeded acceptable boundaries. Rachel, standing tall and composed, felt the tension in the air begin to ease. She knew this was just the beginning of a long investigation, but for the first time, the truth had started to emerge. The parking lot, bathed in the strobing lights of the patrol cars, carried an air of tension and judgment. Rachel stood near her truck, her face firm despite the exhaustion etched across it. Ethan, his expression still marred by anger, now remained silent, though the worry in his eyes betrayed his growing realization that the situation had spiraled beyond his control. Rachel moved cautiously toward her truck, maintaining a safe distance from Ethan. She opened the door and retrieved the dash cam mounted on the dashboard. Carefully removing the memory card, she handed it to the female officer who had just reviewed the security guard's footage. "I record everything as part of my job," Rachel said, her voice clear but devoid of challenge. "This will prove that my account is accurate. He attacked me, and I only defended myself." The female officer accepted the memory card and quickly connected it to a device to view the footage. The video played out in stark detail, showing Ethan stepping out of his patrol car with suspicion, escalating the encounter by using pepper spray and a taser, and Rachel's attempts to remain calm and defend herself throughout the ordeal. The officers watched in silence, the evidence speaking louder than any words. The recording didn't just clarify Ethan's actions. It highlighted Rachel's composure and efforts to de-escalate in an overwhelmingly tense situation. When the video ended, the male officer turned to Ethan, his expression severe. "Ethan, do you have anything to say? Because what we've seen doesn't align with your original statement." Ethan stiffened, his body rigid as he struggled to form a response. Words failed him, and the anger etched on his face gradually gave way to disappointment and shame. Rachel took a deep breath, composing herself before recounting the incident. Her voice was steady, but carried the weight of the tension she had endured. "I was simply doing my job, inspecting the fire safety system in the mall. When he arrived, I explained everything clearly and provided my documentation, but he didn't believe me. Things escalated when he started using force." She paused for a moment, meeting the female officer's gaze directly. "I didn't want any of this to happen. I tried to explain, to stay calm and keep things under control, but he wouldn't listen. I defended myself because I had no other choice. I didn't want to hurt him, but if I hadn't acted, I don't know what might have happened." Rachel's words softened the atmosphere slightly. The officers nodded, their expressions shifting to one of understanding. They recognized that Rachel had done everything in her power to avoid conflict, but Ethan's impulsive actions had pushed the situation out of control. The female officer nodded, her voice maintaining a professional tone, but with a hint of reassurance. "Ms. Carter, we've reviewed the evidence and your testimony. From what we've seen, your actions were within your right to self-defense. We'll document everything and continue our investigation." Ethan, standing a few steps away, tried to interject. "This isn't fair. She provoked me. I was just doing my job." But the male officer cut him off, his voice firm and commanding. "Ethan, stop. From the evidence we've reviewed, it's clear that your actions were inappropriate and a serious breach of protocol. We'll be reporting this to your superiors for further action." Rachel felt some of the weight in her chest lift, though she knew this was far from over. While the officers showed empathy and acknowledged the evidence in her favor, she was aware there would be further interviews and an extended investigation. Ethan, now left with no defense, stood motionless, his eyes brimming with resentment. He knew his already unstable career was now at risk of complete ruin, but his pride wouldn't allow him to admit defeat. The atmosphere in the parking lot was thick with tension and gravity. Ethan, disheveled and visibly exhausted, sat slumped on the ground, clutching his shoulder where Rachel had countered his assault. The sound of an approaching ambulance echoed through the still night, underscoring the severity of the situation. 2 paramedics stepped out of the ambulance and quickly moved toward Ethan to assess his injuries. Accompanying them was another officer, whose authoritative and cold demeanor made it clear he was in charge. He spoke firmly. "Ethan Bradley, you will be taken for medical evaluation, but I advise you to prepare for a thorough investigation. The evidence is undeniable." Ethan looked up, his expression a mix of anger and despair. He opened his mouth to protest, but the male officer cut him off sharply. "Silence, Ethan. Anything you say now will only worsen your situation. We will document this incident thoroughly and escalate it to the appropriate authorities. Your actions tonight are inexcusable." Ethan was helped onto a stretcher by the paramedics. Despite his physical pain, his eyes burned with defiance as he glanced at Rachel from a distance. "You won't get away with this," he muttered under his breath, low enough that only he could hear. Rachel stood near her truck, still holding the fire extinguisher she had used to defend herself. Her face was unreadable, masking the exhaustion that was beginning to take hold. Yet her resolute posture and unwavering gaze spoke volumes, exuding integrity that the other officers couldn't help but notice. As Ethan was loaded into the ambulance, the female officer turned back to Rachel, her voice gentle but professional. "Ms. Carter, we've gathered all the evidence we need for now, but we'll require a more detailed statement from you in the coming days. Are you willing to cooperate?" Rachel nodded, her voice steady, though tinged with fatigue. "I'm ready. I don't want anyone else to go through this. If cooperating with the investigation will help uncover the truth, I'll do everything I can." Rachel's calm and cooperative demeanor stood in stark contrast to Ethan's disarray and instability as he was lifted into the ambulance. Though no words were exchanged, the officers shared glances of mutual agreement. Rachel's account aligned perfectly with the evidence. One of the officers gave Rachel a small nod of acknowledgement, a silent gesture of respect. "We'll ensure this case is handled fairly, Miss Carter." Rachel felt a slight weight lift from her chest, though she knew this was only the beginning. She would have to face the lengthy investigation ahead, as well as the possibility that Ethan might attempt to twist the narrative to save himself. Despite her weariness, Rachel refused to falter. She watched as the ambulance pulled away, taking Ethan and part of the night's story with it. As the flashing blue and red lights faded into the distance, Rachel spoke softly but resolutely. "I won't let anyone distort the truth. This isn't just about protecting myself. It's about justice." The officers, inspired by her determination, continued their work, finalizing the incident report. Rachel stood for a few moments longer, feeling the stillness gradually return to the parking lot. Though the ordeal was far from over, she knew she had done the right thing. As the red and blue lights of the police and ambulance vehicles faded in her rearview mirror, Rachel felt a wave of emotion swell within her. On the drive home, the quiet night outside contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Rachel wondered how many others had faced similar situations, abused by authority, falsely accused, and forced to fight for their truth. She realized how fortunate she was to have had evidence, witnesses, and the determination to stand up against injustice. "Not everyone gets the chance I had," she thought, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "How many people have been crushed by people like Ethan, unable to defend themselves because they lacked evidence or were too afraid to speak up?" Yet Rachel didn't feel bitter. Instead, she felt proud. She had done the right thing. not just to protect herself but to send a message that no one, not even those in positions of power, is above the law. She recalled the look in Ethan's eyes before he was loaded into the ambulance, a mixture of rage, humiliation, and helplessness. She knew Ethan, and perhaps his supporters, wouldn't let this go easily. But Rachel wasn't afraid. She believed in the truth and was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. When she arrived home, Rachel parked in front of her house. The warm glow of the porch light illuminated her face, softening the tension still lingering from the night's ordeal. She stepped out, closed the car door, and stood still for a moment. Her house, peaceful and quiet, was a stark contrast to what she had just endured. Looking up at the sky, where stars sparkled in the darkness, Rachel felt a sense of calm wash over her. Taking a deep breath, she let the cool night air fill her lungs, easing some of the fatigue. Her thoughts shifted beyond herself to the sense of responsibility she now felt. Every small action can spark change, she thought to herself. And if I don't take action, who will? The story closed with Rachel standing in front of her home, her hands relaxed at her sides but her eyes filled with determination. She wasn't just a survivor of that night. She was a voice for her story, one that was not only hers but also for those who couldn't speak out. A week after the incident, Rachel received a call from her company's director, Michael Grant. His warm and appreciative voice resonated through the phone. "Rachel, I want you to know how proud we are of how you handled the situation. You not only protected yourself, but maintained professionalism in an incredibly difficult circumstance. The company has decided to nominate you for the Bravest Employee of the Year award." Rachel felt a surge of emotion, but responded modestly, "Thank you, sir, but I was just doing what I had to do." In another development, Ethan Bradley was officially suspended pending the results of an internal investigation. Reports of the incident spread, and Ethan found himself not only facing criticism from colleagues but also the looming possibility of prosecution. The case served as a stark reminder that the abuse of power is never tolerable. After